In the last episode, we looked at the miserable fate of Thrasipidus after he turned informer for the Emperor Nero. But today, we're going to look at someone who went from being an informer to getting the death penalty. So let's get into it. Our story today begins with Publius Egnatius Celerus. He was born in Athens around 40, but his family was from We know very little about his life before this period, but he became a friend of the Emperor Nero's mother, Agrippina. His first wife was Julia, daughter of Germanicus and niece of the Emperor Claudius. The marriage seems to have been childless and it ended in divorce. He then married Cremuzia, the former wife of his uncle by marriage, Gaius Caesar, Nero's elder brother who died young. The couple had 2 sons. During the reign of Emperor Claudius, Celerus served as suffect consul. The exact date is uncertain, but it must have been between 48 and 54. There is a gap in the historical record during the years immediately following Claudius' death in 54 and the accession of Nero. In July of that year, there was some sort of plot against Nero, perhaps led by the Empress's new husband, her third husband, and Nero's stepfather, Pallas. Burrus and Seneca were in charge of quelling this revolt, whatever it was, and they used Celerus as an intermediary between them and the rebels, persuading them to surrender their weapons and pardon them. Because of this action, Celerus was rewarded with the governorship of Asia. But the historian Suetonius asserts that this was really a demotion because the province had just been pacified, and there was nothing left for him to do there. Celerus returned to Rome in 59 or 60 with large sums of money which he had acquired dishonestly during his term as governor. Now upon his return, he was greeted by Nero with great public games and a triumphal procession. Suetonius tells us that these were celebrated with great magnificence, and that Celerus lived very grandly thereafter. The emperor even gave him a villa on the Esquiline hill that had belonged to Atticus, the friend of Cicero. But the source says that this was really a pretext on Nero's part to plunder Atticus's library. It would have been a fabulous library too if Nero hadn't stolen all the books. Then in 62, Celerus and his wife were accused of plotting against the emperor and were forced to commit suicide. This version of events comes from the same source, Suetonius, who said that Celerus's villa had been seized by Nero, but other sources tell us that this was una forced suicide, and that they both took their own lives willingly. This would make the case of Celerus and his wife similar to that of the earlier conspirators against the emperor Burrus and Seneca. They didn't actually kill the emperor, but they did help plot against him, and so were also deemed enemies of the state. So why did they do it? It could be that Celerus wanted to avenge his father. According to Tacitus, his father, Lucius Celerus, had been killed by the emperor Claudius. But if that's the case, then it wouldn't make sense that he was still favored by Nero. Or maybe he just wanted to stop Nero from ruining Rome and doing all the horrible things he did. Maybe it was his duty as a Roman. In any case, what we know about this alleged plot comes almost entirely from one source, the anonymous author of a letter known as The Dialogue with a Friend. In this letter, a man writes to his friend explaining how he narrowly escaped being involved in the conspiracy when he was summoned by Burrus to join the plot. He refused, however, and instead suggested that Celerus be summoned instead. The conspirators wrote to Celerus proposing that they meet together in Asia. But the Cilician changed his mind when he learned that the plotters had sent only 2 men to summon him, not realizing that they were actually spies sent by Burrus to find out whether he would join the conspiracy. When they returned to Rome without Celerus, Burrus knew that he could not be trusted, so the conspiracy failed before it even really began. The reason why I say this is because there are a lot of doubts as to whether this letter is genuine. It's possible that it was written by a loyalist trying to discredit the conspiracy, especially since the source never reveals his name, and therefore may have been completely invented. If we can trust any of it though, it does explain why Celerus was executed. That's because, according to the letter, when Burrus realized that Celerus could not be trusted, he informed the emperor, and that's probably what led to the seizure of their property. But what makes this case interesting is that Celerus had previously acted as an informer himself, and he was actually awarded a crown for doing so. In fact, the dialogue with a friend actually mentions this and gives us details about it. The anonymous author recalls how the freedman Tigelius came to him begging for assistance after murdering his master. Tigelius had been falsely accused of stealing his master's property, and now he fears that he will be executed for killing him himself. The author advises Tigelius to go to Celerus, a friend of his, and begs him to assist the As it turns out, Celerus was eager to take on the case, and he did so partly because he was already in debt, and partly because he hoped to curry favor with the emperor. According to the letter, he had often appeared in court as an informer, and so he understood the procedures and laws well enough to handle such a case. Eventually, he got Tigelius off free and clear, and he earned a crown for his efforts. This was an actual legal procedure in Roman law where the judge sitting in a court case could award an informer for services rendered to the state, typically by bringing criminals to justice, with a wreath made of oak leaves which signified military valor. However, it doesn't seem like Celerus had turned informer to save innocent people or to help put bad guys away. Rather, Suetonius tells us that Celerus built up a fortune by accusing his fellow Romans of plotting against the the emperor. And Dio Cassius tells us that he was so notorious as an informer that people feared being seen talking to him in public. Even worse, he might have even been the one to inform on Seneca and Gordon, although Suetonius attributes that to a former slave of sin. But here's the thing, we can't know for sure. If he was an informer during the reigns of both Claudius and Nero, then why did Nero reward him so greatly? Why would he give him a triumph over Atticus's library if Celerus had been betraying him? Well, first of all, we don't know exactly what role Celerus played in the early days of Nero's reign. Maybe he helped the young emperor consolidate power and eliminate potential rivals. Maybe he was there to help advise Nero during this difficult time. After all, he was close friends with Agrippina. In that case, it would make sense that Nero would treat him so well. He may have even been rewarded for turning his wife's uncles against the emperor, as Celerus seems to have been close with them as well. That would make him a traitor to his own family, but it's certainly believable. Furthermore, even if Celerus had been a turncoat and had informed on Seneca and Burrus, we can't know that Nero was aware of it. After all, Suetonius also states that Nero didn't realize that Burrus was plotting against him either until it was too late. So maybe he was just blissfully unaware of what Celerus was doing behind the scenes. Still, despite the supposed relationship with Nero, Celerus ended up getting the death penalty along with his wife. And so far as we can tell, none of their descendants survived either. So I guess informing on people and building your career and fortune on the backs of others doesn't always pay off. But anyway, that's all I've got for this episode. If you liked it, please leave a like and a comment down below and subscribe for more content. I'd also like to thank my supporters for helping me make these videos. You guys are awesome and I couldn't do this without you. Until next time, thanks for watching.